Hey YouTube, we are back again this week for another video portion of the Daly Dose Sports podcast. Hope everyone out there is doing well. This week, we are actually already starting to look forward a little bit to the football season, and we're looking at which teams still need to find their starting quarterback. We actually just looked at some of the top quarterback battles that are coming in college football. Well, now we're moving over to the NFL, where a number of teams are in need of a quarterback. So let's jump in right now. Let's switch over to the NFL, where a number of teams are going to have some fierce quarterback battles this season, and they could end up going all year long. Let's take a look at some of these teams that still need to find their quarterback. Let's start off with a team that hasn't had a quarterback competition in like 20 years, but they're probably going to have one this year. Last year, the New England Patriots lost Tom Brady, so they went and signed veteran Cam Newton. Brady went on to win the Super Bowl. Newton was one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire NFL. Newton threw just 8 touchdowns while throwing 10 interceptions. So the Patriots went out and they drafted Alabama quarterback Mac Jones. Well, Jones looked pretty good at Alabama, but will he be good enough to beat out Cam Newton? You know full well, those fans up there are going to be screaming for Mac Jones to be starting from day one, but what if he's not ready? He only really played one true full season at the college level. That is going to be a big jump for Mac Jones to go to the NFL. We'll see if the Patriots can solve their quarterback situation. You know, there may not be a bigger mess in all of pro sports right now than the Houston Texans. And their quarterback battle should actually be particularly ugly. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson? He is facing multiple accusations of sexual assault by multiple massage therapists. Either way, Deshaun's probably not going to be playing this year. So the starting job is going to be up in the air. And it's going to fall to either veteran Tyrod Taylor, who the Texans picked up in free agency, and who has always been, let's say, underwhelming wherever he's gone. He's okay. He doesn't like to pull the trigger. He doesn't like to throw the ball downfield. That's not going to make people happy. Or the Texans may end up going with their rookie draft pick out of Stanford, Davis Mills, who has barely any experience whatsoever. Either way, I can't imagine this situation is going to go well. There's not a ton of talent down in Houston. Morale down in Houston has to be absolutely horrible. Either Tyrod Taylor or Davis is going to be the starter on a very bad football team. We'll see who ends up winning that job. But either way, the Texans are probably going to be a pretty big dumpster fire this season. Speaking of dumpster fires, the Denver Broncos need to figure out who their starting quarterback will be unless they can somehow convince the Green Bay Packers to trade Aaron Rodgers here to Denver. And while the Broncos have been fortunate enough to have 2 Hall of Famers in their history, they also have a history of having a lot of terrible quarterbacks other than John Elway and Peyton Manning. And right now, the Broncos are back in that familiar rut of having terrible quarterbacks. Drew Lock is entering his 3rd season as the starter, and he has been, how can I say this, truly awful every year. I mean, he has a career quarterback rating of around 50. That's worse than like Carson Wentz last year or Gardner Minshew. That's really bad. So the Broncos went out and they signed veteran Teddy Bridgewater to press Lock for the starting job. Hey, Teddy Tuglev has a much better quarterback rating than Lock, but I mean, he hasn't exactly set the world on fire either. So who's going to end up starting in Denver? I don't know. And honestly, this could be really ugly. Of the two, I would probably lean towards Teddy because he's not going to turn the ball over as much. But here's the problem. In order to go with Teddy Bridgewater, the Broncos have to admit they made a mistake on Drew Lock. And we know pride is such a strong factor in these decisions by professional franchises. I don't know if Denver's ready to do that. I think they signed Teddy in case Drew Lock maybe gets hurt, but not really just to bench him. Probably unfair, but we'll see how the quarterback competition shapes up here in Denver. The Washington football team actually has put together a pretty solid team. They've got a really good defense. Do not forget that Washington actually battled the eventual champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the playoffs last year as close as anyone else did all through the postseason. But Washington didn't have very good quarterback play. Well, Alex Smith is now gone. So they went out and they signed Ryan Fitzpatrick. So the starting job is settled in Washington now, right? It's Ryan Fitzpatrick's job. Well, I doubt it. Because Fitzpatrick is as roller coaster of a quarterback as we have ever seen. There are a lot of highs. There are also a ton of lows. Meanwhile, backup quarterback Taylor Heinicke, he really showed some toughness last year. He showed some promise in that playoff game against Tampa last year. If Fitzpatrick has one of those kind of mid-season swoons where he just looks terrible for 2 or 3 weeks, will the Washington faithful be screaming for Heinicke? Oh, you had better believe they'll be screaming for Heinicke. They'll be screaming for anyone other than the bearded one. And if so, Washington could end up with a bit of a quarterback controversy. It's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. Okay, YouTube, make sure that you go out and you check out the rest of the podcast this week. This week on The Dose, we actually are discussing Mike Krzyzewski preparing for retirement. The Boston Celtics had kind of an odd coaching change. We do take a quick look at the NBA playoffs and how those are going. And we also look at some of the top college quarterback battles. It's not just the NFL that we're looking at today. And with Coach K retiring, our Daily Dose Top 5 today is going to be counting down the top 5 times a college basketball coaching legend has retired. Well, how did that next guy do? It's a very, very mixed bag, I'll tell you that. So make sure you go out and you check out the rest of the podcast. I will leave a link here in the comments on YouTube for you. Hope you all are doing well. I will see you all next Wednesday. Have a great week.